Hey, what's up everybody? Rob Marzullo here, Ram Studio Comics. How you doing? Back at you with another video, and this one is going to be on creating shapes of shadows and a little bit more cross-hatching. Seems to be that a lot of people have problems in that area, myself included, so figure I could do some practice work here in front of you, show you some traditional means that I would take to kind of hone my skills on that, and yeah, hopefully help us both in that process. So all right, another thing I wanted to point out is these stacked heads over here, which look kind of creepy, obviously. I did that because I also wanted to touch on another quick topic while doing this, kind of a little added bonus there. Is the 8 heads tall model for creating your proportions to your character. So if you struggle getting your characters looking right, try grabbing their head, copying it, stacking it off to the side in this weird kind of totem pole effect, and then do your proportions. It works out really well. You know, it's just something that I remember picking up from the old how to draw comics books and things. So figured I would throw that in there, just FYI. So, and if you're drawing a big hulking type character like this, then it can be even up to, 10 and a half heads tall. It's really just depends on the proportions that you draw. But I wanted to show you these scales in regards to that because proportions can also be a tricky thing to tackle. So let me know if you'd also like to see a video just on proportions, and I'll get that uploaded on this channel as well. Alright, so as far as the shading, I started shadowing a little bit on this character, but not much yet. What I'm going to do is create a new layer for each one. Let's say this, alright, this is guy on left. I'm going to create a layer and just start adding some shadows. And I want to show you how basically you can work out some of your shapes of shadows. And there's a number of ways to do it. For instance, say we want to shade this arm over here to start, and it'll give us our basis for how we're going to shade the entire character. Say we just start drawing in our shadows, and we say, okay, we want this character to be in 20% shadow. So if I was to imagine the shoulder here is 100%, maybe 20% is like that. Okay, so if we figure that's 20% of the area, then we'll just continue on and start shading our character. So, one of the things that's real easy to do, and I've talked about this before, it's really easy to get in the habit of just tracing the form. So let's say that, a very typical way, traditional way might be something like this, which is going to look a little too rounded. It doesn't have much life there. If you do that to every muscle, this character is going to look very bubbly. We don't want bubbly. So if you start studying real shadows, they a lot of times just kind of bend and twist a little bit. I mean, not a lot. You don't want something too crazy, but they have a little bit more of just a random flow to them. So let's try even this. Even though this is still somewhat rounded, let's start here. Fill this in. Got a little bit of shadow coming off the chest there, back onto the shoulder. And that's another thing to keep in mind, that shadows don't just trim around each muscle. So if I just go, like say, I picture a shadow coming in here. I give it a little bit of angular effect right there. I got a picture where the muscle changes shape and then blends into the next muscle. And say that I come up with something like, I don't know, we'll say something like this, just to give us a starting point. Sometimes it's good just to start and then edit as you go and try to look at it from different perspectives as you're working. Okay, so that, to me, that bicep looks really funky right now, but it'll give us our starting point. Now, the only thing that I see wrong with this is that, all right, for one, there's got to be a bit of shadow coming from the chest onto the bicep because he's got this big bulking chest, and depending where the light source is, some of that shadow is going to bleed down over to the bicep. So I would probably add a little bit in there to do something like that. Erase back. And then also the shoulder is going to shadow down onto the tricep and bicep. So it's good to figure in some kind of shape for that. And I don't know if these are the right shapes, but we'll just go ahead and do it. And, it looks a hair messy, that shape or whatever, but I want to explain the purpose of it first. So, you know, to think of all these shapes as, you know, obviously one unified document, or document, sorry, one unified shape, and then also as individual shapes, so that you can kind of, you know, start working out and breaking down the idea that, okay, you got the shadow from this big, you know, uh, pectoral muscle or whatever, his big old chest sickle. But then also that, you know, it maybe rounds down on the, what's this, the rib cage or sternum or something. And then it also creates a drop shadow on that. So you want to start thinking in terms like that, and you'll get better shadows overall, because it's real easy, like I just did right here, just to make that smooth rounded shape all the time, and it gets very boring and not quite accurate. Like the shadow that you might see on the back of the trapezoid here and the side, chances are it's going to do some kind of, you know, flowing connected shadow, something like this. Let's fill that in. And the way they connect sometimes isn't going to look like it makes sense, but the more you study them, you'll start to see it's just because shadows are all over the place. There's multiple light sources. Not everything's going to be visible. So sometimes you're just going to have to block certain parts out. Sometimes little weird areas are going to catch light, things like that. So you want to try to envision that as you're creating your shadows on your character. And then, you know, get into a little bit of cross-hatching like this and feather some lines in there to give it another level of interest. Okay, so let's say that, you know, and even this, maybe there's a little bit of shadow on the front of the bicep right there. And I think the trickiest part about getting comfortable with doing your shading is covering up parts of your drawing. Like, it feels really awkward to want to cover up a part that maybe you think this arm, I don't think this is a good arm, but maybe you think this arm came out really good, and you're like, oh, I don't want to shade the whole thing because it covers up how perfect I got my little line work in there. So that sometimes can be like a hindrance. I've felt that when I'm trying to shade something, like, oh man, it looks cool, I don't want to put these shadows all over, but your shadows will really propel your characters off the page. So you got to really fight yourself on that one and just block them in. Just really, and over time your shadows will make that character look, you know, a lot better. And you know, at any rate. So just got to do it. So let me see here if I'm even shading this right. So I'm trying to get some pretty solid areas on the back here, and I'm fighting myself where I keep leaving these openings. That's one of my problems. I always leave these little gaps because I want to show these, you know, maybe there's a little light on this back part of the arm. Well, probably not. So let's just fill that in like that. And let's just fill this whole piece right here in, because chances are this whole bottom of this fist is in complete darkness from this angle of where we've already defined the light source up here. Another thing would be, how's the tricep work? It comes over like this. The bicep's probably a little too big right here. And there's that divider muscle right here. So let's just shade that in right there. The other thing I would say to watch out for, unless you're going for the stylized look of this effect, is putting too many angular shapes into your design. Unless that's your style, and then by all means do it, because that is a cool style. It's real popular right now anyways. But if you're trying to get a more organic feel to your anatomy, that might be something that's blocking you. So, and what I mean by angular shapes is like even this part of the tricep right here. If you see, it's got a little bit of an angular thing going on. Boom, 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 like that. It's really good for techie type stuff. But if you feel like your muscles are looking a little bit too blocky and not, they look too stiff, it might be that you're doing a little bit of that in your shadows. Now, one way you can break that up is to actually just shade it out. So let me see if I can do it right here and show you what I'm talking about. So I got a little bit angular feel to the top of the shoulder there. So what I'm going to try to do is cross hatch a bit and just round out the bottom of it by doing this crisscross effect here. And then I'm going to skip this area right here because I'm trying to actually blend that in. And I do a little bit back here. So I don't know if that worked. I think it did. But so I just try to soften up some of those angular shadows with a little bit of cross-hatching. A much easier way, like in this part, is just to try to round some of that out. Maybe, you know, reverse bend here, round it down to here. Try not to bring so many to points like I did right there. Try to always maybe round that a little bit, and then to point it, do your crosshatch or your line work. That softens up your edges. So just little things like that. And you know, I can't explain all that for you entirely because it's really dependent on what your style is and what you like to see in your work. So you just have to find that out for yourself. It's like when people ask me, you know, hey man, how do I pick up my style? How do I develop my style? Those are just choices that you make as you learn all the different rules in this stuff. So it's going to just take you time to work through that and develop who you are as an artist and what you like and what you don't. I think the biggest thing that develops your style is what you actually like. So I can't tell you what you like. You just have to try different things and see what resonates with you. So you just practice and trying a lot of different things. My big thing whenever I teach people, whether it be how to draw, use software, whatever it is experimentation. I think experimentation and the ability to think outside the box and try new things will go further than any one thing that I could tell you, because it just basically will allow you to pick up new things and try them. And if you close yourself in with one process and one way of doing a certain thing, then you're kind of going to stagnate your ability to learn. So just experiment, try a multitude of things, and that should get you a lot further. And I think that's why I tend to do decent with what things that I try, is because I just keep trying different ways of making something happen. Even if it's small incremental changes, you're going to eventually figure things out. Okay, so now let's move over to here. Let's picture that we got a shadow off the chest here. Like that. Let's do some cross hatching off this part. Okay, another thing too, I had a question from, sorry, I didn't write down the subscriber's name, and it was when to crosshatch. You know, I never know when to fill in my solid blacks and when to crosshatch. What I would say about that is that crosshatching is just basically, my interpretation of it is just that it's a grayscale, that it's a tonal value. So you just have to look at when you're trying to shade your character, round out your form. So that's one way to look at crosshatching. Sometimes crosshatching can just be when you want to add a cool texture to your composition. So you can utilize it as an effect where you're trying to simply add another, like you'll hear me say, area of interest. And the reason I say that is because sometimes I just want something to look cool. I want it to draw the viewer's eye and say, whoa, that's neat. You know, there's no rhyme. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to it. Most of the time, you're just doing it as a gradient, as a shading. So if you, I guess the best way to do it would be just to throw in your solid black shapes at first, all the way around your character, and then really look at it and say, okay, like this bicep here. You know, maybe I've got, let's try the shadow like this, for instance. So maybe I've got the shadow on the whole side of this bicep here. And then maybe most of this area will all be in shadow. Something like, I don't know. We'll say something like this for now. Okay, so I've got that all in shadow. Well, to me that looks, boring a little bit. If that was all, if I was done with that part of the arm, I think it would look just a tad plain or something. So to fix that, I'm I want to see a little bit of gradient, you know, right here. So from that big block of shadow there, just break off some gradient. And there's no right or wrong way to do that or where to add that. And then the more that I add the darker lines, like I'm feathering these lines down at the base, is because I picture that the shadow would be more influenced right there. So that's just the only thing I'm really thinking when I add that. Now I'm picturing that I think I should see a little bit of shadow like up there, just to help round out that bicep. I don't know if that's correct. I don't know if that's the right way to do it. I just think it would look cool. So it's a combination of that thought process. So hopefully that helps you. I don't know if it does. I wish I could explain it better. That's all I kind of think about when I'm doing it. Just like how I do this sometimes, I'll take a little highlight line and I'll go like this, and you know, I can't remember where. I've seen it on a lot of different artists' thing, and to me that means, oh, maybe there's a little bit of light right there. Or it's just kind of a neat way to hurry up and round out that form a little bit more. I could just throw that little line like here and there, and kind of add another level of you know, dimension to that little form. So yeah, hopefully that helps you out there. Sorry if it didn't. Okay, and I just keep going around and grabbing these little areas and throwing them in. So like this area here, you know, I don't know, maybe there wouldn't be a highlight on the side of the arm right there, but if I threw that in there and I thought it should be shaded down a lot further, I would just kind of throw some pretty heavy lines in there. Something like that. And then if the shadow is real strong on the inside of the arm, I would try to continue that, and maybe, let's try, see, and I keep having that problem. I always want to throw that rounded shape in there. That's my, you know, force of habit type thing that I've got to break. So I've got to think, all right, maybe instead of rounding that shadow down like that and it looking a lot like a bubble or a teardrop, let me try reversing that shape and trying something like this. Shadow comes up into here, maybe. Let me fill that in. And see, it doesn't look right, so I might be redoing that part. So I really do struggle with seeing the shapes of shadows, but like I said, experiment, play around. Especially with digital, you're fortunate that you can simply block something in kind of real ugly like that, back away, see if it gels right. It doesn't. Neither does this arm over here, but I gotta roll with it now. I already did it. Can't go back. I mean, I could go back, but sometimes you can't go back. You just gotta move forward. Or like I do here, go work on something else until I come back to it, and hopefully it something clicks. Which, you'd be amazed, it does happen sometimes. And even like right here, obviously that's kind of the cheating, quick, easy little drop shadow from each abdomen there. But then you have to think about, okay, what would really look accurate? This arm's kind of in front of his abdomen. Maybe there would be, you know, kind of a drop shadow from the arm. So maybe something like this. You could do some lines or some solid shadow, something like that. You could also think about how much of this oblique area, I think it's called, is in shadow. And then sometimes it's good to just block in a big chunk of shadow just because. starting to get there. I just feel like by adding a lot of this stuff, it just gives a lot more effect to the character. It's not so boring when you add, you know, some nice heavy shadows. Now, another thing I'll do sometimes if I'm struggling with where to add shadows, I'll go back to sketching them in. And I've actually watched a lot of demonstrations from other artists that I admire, and they say that's wrong. So I hate to tell you to do that, but I'd be lying if I said that I didn't do it. So, in which case I'm just gonna say, and I don't know why it's wrong. I think that maybe it's a speed thing or recognizing. You should be able to recognize your shapes of shadows, where sometimes I can't, so I just start scribbling them in until I can find something. Not sure why that is actually, but do your research. Always check, you know, check a bunch of resources. I'm sure you are. If you found this channel and you're watching my stuff, I'm sure you watch a lot of different other artists that you admire and learn from them, and that's obviously a great thing. I'm a bit of a YouTube junkie myself, so I watch as many other YouTube artists as I can. And maybe this entire thumb's blocked out in shadow, something like that. And the only thing I see that's bothering me in this area is this, well, a couple things, but really I always go for the thing that sticks out like a sore thumb, and I work on that first. So that one side muscle or whatever just looks like this, I don't know, slug shape on his side. It's just really bothering me, I guess. But I guess so what I would do there is just shade that down a bit. And oftentimes I'll just go for that one thing that really sticks out and bugs me, and I'll do that, and I'll work through the design that way. That way, if there's some things I can't get to, I at least got to the things that annoyed me the most. And I think my storyboard profession has taught me that, because sometimes you run out of time on your deadlines, like just because, you know, all of a sudden you're working on a job and they say, you know, we need that stuff like in an hour when you had 5 hours a minute ago or whatever. So it's good to always work on the things that bother you first, or the most, I should say. Get those out of the way, because you might just run out of time, and I don't know. I just hate turning in work that I'm not proud of or that I could have made better. Yeah, so I would say that drawing in your shapes of shadows would be faster, because as I'm sketching here, I'm just feeling like, you know, certain areas where I could be drawing them in would definitely be a lot quicker. I'm just trying to give you a bit of a demonstration on some shading here, so I'm just trying a couple different things, which I'm no master when it comes to shading, that's for sure. I know my strong suits and I know my weak suits. And shading would be one of my weaker attributes. But all that tells me is, hey, I need to practice more shading. What does this guy look like? Man, if we just changed him to da-da-da. I'm kidding. Could be. You never know. You never know. Okay, so now, yeah, so I think that's starting to work. It's not great, but it's doable, I guess. Um, and I would just use that same bit of style, try to keep it similar. So essentially the light source is coming down like this on our character, and then I would just work down the form that way, all the way down to the, the drop shadow on the ground. Sometimes you can start with this too. It's a good way to define your light source. And depending on how detailed you like making these, you can obviously try to form your entire character. Getting the arm and the muscular and all that. And I just kind of cheat and fade it off a little bit, get a few little details in there and then start cross-hatching. Cheat. But it gives you a good way to define your angle of your light source. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this next part. I'll time-lapse this. I'll finish shading this character, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so now on this last part, I want to show you another technique that I've been using a lot and I've mentioned in other videos, but just keep trying to reiterate certain things that I think might help people. So, and it is related to shading here. So I'll add a new layer, and I'll grab this pen tool here. I'll grab this inker nib letterer. I don't know where I got it, but I just turned it to like a grayscale kind of fat marker. And if you struggle with some shadows, kind of a neat way to do it sometimes is just, we'll say that I want this arm to be in heavy shadow. We'll say at least half, 50% shadows with a bounced light coming from the bottom. So what I'll do is start blocking in almost like I'm painting with a big marker or paintbrush. And I think part of what got me to want to start doing it this way sometimes is, I guess, a couple things. Like when I draw at shows, I'll do stuff like this, or when I'm doing my digital painting, this is pretty much how I do my shadows. So I just thought, let me try to combine that effect with my comic book stuff. So I will show you that in action here and see if it helps you out. I think it's a lot more of a free-flowing kind of way to create your shadows. It's definitely quicker for some, because you're just kind of really blocking them in really, really fast and not having to think about it a whole lot, or as much I should say. So I want to make sure there's some bounce light in there. At first I'm just going to throw them in real messy and kind of heavy. Keeping in mind that my light source is pointing down at the study or whatever you want to call it, the big muscular arm here. It's like Hulk's looking over at it like puny bicep. Hulk smash. Alright, so we'll say that's our big chunk of shadow there. Pretty obscure, pretty messy, but we'll clean it up in the next part. So now what I do is I convert that to a blue line, like so. It gives me this guideline for drawing in my shadows, and I'll time-lapse this next part and show you what we come up with. Alright, so there you have it. That's some examples of how I would potentially shade some comic book heroes. So let me know what you thought of this video. Like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more. And be sure to let me know what you'd like to see in the future, and I'll get that on my video request list. And as always, I thank you for stopping by and tuning in. So more videos on the way real soon. We will talk to you. Keep drawing, keep having fun. Bye.